right, test, check. Yep,
Feel okay with
sounds
that?
good. Yeah, no, this is great.
Great.
Pardon me, you're fine right there, don't you worry.
Well, good morning. Glad that you're here for Keys. It is Friday. Fridays keep jumping up so quickly, and I'm excited to have you here. I'm sure there are a few people that are live streaming, and we hope that they're able to get in seamlessly today. A lot of times it doesn't always work seamlessly, but we're excited that we have that opportunity. We have next week, we will be at Casa Rio for a birthday lunch, and following birthday lunch, there will be a river cruise. And I will not be here. I will be in Port Aransas celebrating my wife's birthday next week, but I'm leaving you in the good hands of Stanley and Gary. I saw Gary here. There he is. And they have everything under control, or will have things under control. I did my homework on Wednesday afternoon to do the legwork to find out, and I have all kinds of information for you guys. But thank you for your willingness to step in. And Nona's going to keep everything under control. Because you don't trust Stanley and Gary? Won't take a vote on that, but we're excited for our birthday lunch, and it'll be a good day. And there's not an additional cost for the cruise. So sign up for lunch, pay for lunch if it's not your birthday, and enjoy the cruise following lunch. That's a special gift from funding that we've had over the years. So it's not me, it's people that have been here years and years. And so that will be a fun time. How many are planning on doing the cruise? All right, good. And then, so make sure you sign up for that and sign up for lunch. And we're excited for that. So that's next week. The week after that, we'll have Emily Balcom from the Alamo, and she was also an announcer on a local TV for a number of years. And so the signups are out there. I'm getting the signups together for November. November 3rd, we'll have a report from some of the folks that went to Israel for the missions trip to Chivek. And I know that many of you contributed to the food, and appreciate that. And then we've got the week after that. I don't have it in my head. I should have written it down. We will be doing Elf Louise the end of November. We will be doing our birthday lunch here in this room in November, and it will be a Thanksgiving dinner type lunch that Murillo is working on for us. And so be sure I will get those sign-ups together before I leave. Yes. The van, our lunch is at 11:30. The van will leave here, and it can be multiple trips. It's a 15-passenger van, but the first trip would be, I would say, 10:45, or between 10:45 and 11, depending on the number of people. But if we need to take more than one trip, Gary is driving the van, so take that up with him. But we will make sure that everybody gets transported to the restaurant. You're on your own to get back. No, I'm just joking. We have parking at the restaurant so that the van will be there all day and won't have to wait for something to come up or have to call somebody to come get you. Unless Gary falls asleep, then you have to keep him going. So we are also doing did I say we are doing Elf Louise at the end of the month, next month? And we won't meet the week before Thanksgiving, or week after Thanksgiving. So watch for the sign-ups coming out. Probably will be ready by Sunday or by next week for sure. And we've had some good things this year, and we're going to end up the year strong, and we're working on things January, February. All the regular things that we've done are booked, like Rick Cavender and King Antonio, and I think those are the two big things that we are excited and booked for them. And the rodeo folks are coming back with representatives from the Clown Corps. So, yeah. And they'll fit in with us very well, right? Okay, any other questions, things I'm missing? My head is really spinning right now because I'm on trying to get everything together before I leave on Sunday. Today, we're going to hear from Kevin Bieniek. I had to ask him because I've been struggling with that name, announcing that he was here. Kevin works heavily with the Biggs Institute, and we have Ann Biggs with us today, and there are a number of Biggs family that are part of our church, and so we're glad to have Kevin with us. He's going to be sharing a bit of what he does, and hopefully there'll be some time for questions. So Kevin, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Benja. All right. Everybody can hear me? Mic's working? Great. Joe never told me I was between the mayor and the Alamo. And I know today is Friday the 13th, and I'm talking about brains, but nothing spooky, I promise. Again, my name is Kevin Bieniek. I am an assistant professor and a faculty member at UT Health San Antonio. So I teach, I do research, but the other hat that I wear is I am the director of the Biggs Institute Brain Bank and have been for the past 5 years. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about our program, what we do, and I'd be happy to kind of answer any questions that you have about the brain or about our program or our center as well. So let's see here. I'll aim at the apple. That one, perfect. So just a quick disclosure, the views and content that I'm presenting today are entirely my own and do not reflect the views and opinions of UT Health San Antonio. Whoops. And just to kind of quick clarify, because this is something that can be a little confusing at times, when I'm talking about the brain donation that I'm talking about today, there's kind of different types of tissue donation. A lot of people are familiar with this one, right? That little donor heart on your driver's license. And that is, so there's living donation. A person donates their kidney to another person. Both people are alive. There's deceased organ donation, and that is done through transplantation. And the organization that actually does this here in Texas is called TOSA, or the Texas Organ Sharing Alliance. They're based here in Bexar County. And this is coordinated to get organs out and into people that need them for donations. And then the last one really is what I'm going to be talking about today, and that's deceased donation for research purposes. So just to kind of keep that in mind. Just because you have that heart on your driver's license doesn't mean I'm going to get your brain when you die. All right, so the outline of the talk today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the brain bank, tell you about my own family story, maybe some reasons why to donate. Some of the frequently asked questions we get about brain donation, and one in particular is about religious and spiritual beliefs with brain donation. And being here at First Presbyterian, I want to talk a little bit about that too, as well as some other questions, and then give you some takeaways and open it up for discussion. So first and foremost, the Biggs Institute Brain Bank is the people. I am one part of that, but we have an amazing team. And this isn't even all the people that are in the brain bank. We have a lot of new people that I haven't gotten their photos yet. But generally it's myself and my co-director, Maggie Flanagan. And then we have 2 other neuropathologists on our team as well. And then a whole staff that's working behind the scenes to get those slides to us, to help us with the evaluations, to help families with the donations, doing research as students, all of this is a team effort. And so first and foremost, we are the people that do that. One of the most important people in our group, and for today's talk too, is our brain donation coordinator, Dr. Amanda Watson. This is the person that answers the phone, that's behind the email, that's really helping families. This can be a very difficult time, understandably, and Amanda's our answer, our support, and is helping care for these families during this time. All right, and the other thing I wanted to point out too is the Biggs Institute Brain Bank is just one petal on the flower that is the amazing Glenn Biggs Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Disease. Our group it's a multidisciplinary center for patients and families that are suffering from Alzheimer's disease and other neurologic conditions. So, I mean, certainly the lens that I see everything through is through brain donation, but we have basic scientists, we have population scientists, we have clinical trials, we have neurologists, neuropsychologists, genetic counselors, imaging, caregiver support. This is a really big team. It's a really critical part of UT Health San Antonio. And so we are, again, one small part of that. The Biggs Institute Brain Bank has been around now for 5 years. And in that 5 years, we have grown from only a handful of cases when I first arrived to now we're actually upwards of 270 cases in the bank. And certainly while we focus here in the San Antonio area, we accept donations really from all over the state of Texas. So we go up to Dallas, to go over to Houston, we've gone down to the Valley, and even gotten brain donations from out of state as well. Our goal is to help families to make brain donation accessible to all, and that really kind of means taking people wherever they are and with whatever they have. And our brain bank is just a little bit about it. Our average age of death is around 78 from our donors. We are pretty evenly split between males and females. And with the local community and population, there's a really big interest and focus on brain donation and research in Hispanics. And our brain bank is about 10% Hispanic as well. So brain banking is a really critical and interesting way of studying diseases. It's a very complete picture of the disease because we have the tissue there. We can look at it. We can see what's going on. But the vision of the Biggs Institute and our brain and biobank is to have people come in before they die, before they donate, to get them to come in and to do exams and do clinical studies, to give DNA or blood or CSF or hair or whatever, get an MRI image. All of these different things may have different abilities to diagnose diseases, but they are snapshots of the disease or of the person's aging while they're still alive. And then when we get the brain, it's a really kind of valuable resource to be able to go back and to look at the brain relative to the data that we collected before we had that donation. And really, again, very biased because this is what I do, but I really think the brain is kind of central. We hear this term sometimes called bench to bedside in precision medicine, where we have the patient and we can go to the lab and then we can go right back to the patient for personal, individualized medicine. I mean, that's the goal, that's the vision of a lot of biomedical science now. But for us, brain donation is kind of really central to this. Obviously, our bedside, our patient's deceased and is not, we can't give them answers, but we can go back and give their family answers. We can work with our clinicians to understand what that individual's clinical picture was like relative to the brain. And then we can also take that brain tissue resource and go to our scientists, and we can use that as a way to discover new pathways, new biomarkers, eventually new potential cures for these diseases too. So brain donation is, and we'll talk about this more too, it's a very personal decision. It's a family decision. Actually, when an individual dies, their remains are, in the state of Texas, are the property of the next of kin. So this is a decision that while in an individual level, it might be something that somebody's always wanted. If the family doesn't know about it, if they're not supportive, it can sometimes fall through the cracks. So this is something that takes time, that we encourage families to have these discussions together. Really part of kind of advanced directive planning. You know, what do I want the end of my life to be? What kind of legacy do I want to leave for others? And this is part of that decision. But when a person does decide to make that decision, really we have a process where there are two kind of forms where people can enroll. They provide their information. We have them provide consent that they want to do this, and just a very kind of brief questionnaire, and that's really it. That's all we need. We save that information, and then we want you to keep your brain as long as you can. We will wait years. We will wait decades. We want you to have the best life and enjoy San Antonio and go on river cruises. I'm jealous that I'm not doing that next weekend. But when that time comes, we've got everything there that we need, and we can work to make that brain donation happen. So with kind of sparing some of the nitty-gritty details, generally, just thinking about what is a brain donation, what goes into it, what comes from it, we actually work with funeral homes, we work with mortuaries, we have relationships with a lot of the big facilities here in San Antonio and around Texas, where we will have somebody go to that facility and do a brain autopsy. And when we get that brain tissue, we actually do different things with it, because having different types of brain tissue available lets us do different types of diagnostics and research. So we actually, part of the brain is frozen, and this cryopreservation allows us to go in and get DNA and RNA and measure those things for science. Part of it is fixed, and that fixed tissue is actually what we put into blocks that go onto slides, and then eventually those slides get scanned and digitized. So everything we do now, much like every other profession, is getting into that digital world, and we can do a lot of things virtually. We can look at the slides, we can look at brains, we can have pathologists share and collaborate that way. These slides are what we use to evaluate and make our diagnosis. The brain bank is a double-sided coin. One of the sides of that coin is getting answers to families, doing that evaluation, letting people know what the illness was. The flip side is using that donation, using that gift as a resource for science. And at this point, we can do both things. We can evaluate tissue. We can also use AI, machine learning, use different ways to analyze it, to look for really small changes and details that can help give us secrets to these diseases. So I wanted to, that's just kind of the brain bank, what it is, what we do. But I wanted to kind of share, getting kind of back to the title of my talk in the brain donation program, I kind of wanted to share my own family story and how brain donation is personal to me. So these are my grandparents. These are my dad's grandparents. This is my grandpa Frank. My middle initial is, my middle name is Frank, and I always use that middle initial whenever I publish a scientific paper, little homage to my grandfather. And this is my grandmother, Kathy. My grandfather was military police, and then he was a police officer for many years. He did construction. My grandmother was a secretary, and then a housewife with 6 kids. And 10 years ago to this day, my grandfather suffered a heart attack and died. And it wasn't until my grandpa's passing that we started to recognize that my grandmother was having problems with dementia. They were very reliant on each other. They worked so closely together. They helped each other out. So my grandfather was able to compensate for that when it was just them. But once my grandfather passed, we started to recognize that my grandma was suffering from dementia and had memory problems. So at first she moved in with one of my aunts and lived there for a little bit, but after a couple of years, the dementia continued to progress, and we had to put her in a memory care facility. So this is all of my family visiting her. This is my oldest son, Corbin. He was a couple years old. My brothers, my wife, and my parents. And at this point, actually, she doesn't know my name. She doesn't remember us. She actually thinks Corbin is my mom and dad's child. But there's still a lot of elements about her that I recognize. She still loved kids. She was still a very happy, optimistic person. While there was a lot of confusion sometimes with us being there, we could still feel all that joy. But then, the disease progressed up until 2 years ago tomorrow, my grandmother passed. And at that time, we made the decision to donate her brain as well. Not because of what I do, not because we were needing answers. We just knew that my grandmother, her kindness, she would have wanted, her experience, her donation to mean something to somebody else, to help another family. So the Alzheimer's Association walk-ins, Alzheimer's is next weekend. This is from last year. These are my girls. My daughter Evelyn was actually born a month after my grandmother passed. And every year we do this walk. We would do it before when my grandmother had dementia, but it means more to me now, knowing that my family's experience and her gift really is kind of helping to make the difference for future generations that are going to experience Alzheimer's disease. So, kind of shifting then to why donate. I think there are a lot of different reasons. I kind of hopefully touched on them a little bit in my own story, but these are the ones that probably come up the most that I hear. One of them is just we want to contribute to research and help future patients. This is something that I consider would call altruism. You're helping people. You might not know who those people are, but you, through selflessness, through the gift, wanting to kind of make an impact and change other people's lives. The other one is we want to know what happened to our loved one. I'll talk a little bit about the clinical experience of Alzheimer's disease, but brain banking and getting that tissue and doing a neuropathology analysis is ultimately the gold standard or the baseline truth of what was going on in an individual's brain while they were alive. Some people want to contribute to medical education. I'll talk about that. And then kind of related to wanting to know what happened and giving our families answers, we want to know how this disease will impact other members of our family. Maybe that's because of a genetic component and interest in family planning, anticipating disease in kind of the next generation within a family. Those types of information can be useful for brain donation as well. So that kind of going to that second point of wanting answers and getting what I would consider as closure. That neuropathology evaluation is kind of the answer, that closure that a lot of people seek. Sometimes they can get that through having a really great doctor, through doing all these tests, through getting a diagnosis that is complete and accurate. Sometimes it's coming to our brain bank and getting that report and kind of spelling everything out. So this is actually a little bit old now, but 10 years ago, we looked at the Alzheimer's Disease Center. So there are about 30 Alzheimer's disease centers throughout the U.S. We are one of the brand newest one. We're the only one in Texas right now. But of the roughly 30 Alzheimer's disease centers in the U.S., 10 years ago, they took all these brain donations that they had, and they looked at the clinical diagnosis of these donations, and then they looked at the tissue to see what the underlying disease was. And they actually found that there was about 70 to 80% sensitivity. And what I mean by sensitivity is cases that really were diagnosed, cases that really had Alzheimer's disease pathology were correctly identified as Alzheimer's disease in the clinic while the person was alive. And they found a wide range, 44 to 71% specificity. So this is saying that true non-Alzheimer's disease cases, looking in the brain, were actually not called Alzheimer's disease while a person was alive. But what that implication leads to is there are these cases what we call false positives and false negatives. So somebody might be called Alzheimer's disease while they're alive, and then we get the brain and that's not the case, it's something else. Or maybe they were called not Alzheimer's disease while they're alive, they had something else, but when we get the brain, we find Alzheimer's disease. So maybe kind of shown in another way, it's a little bit confusing because the term Alzheimer's disease to me means something different to a lot of people. Alzheimer's disease, when I look at a brain, it's these sticky amyloid plaques, and it's these tau neurofibrillary tangles that are in the brain. But a lot of people know Alzheimer's disease as the forgetfulness, the memory loss, the inability to visually, spatially organize yourself, to getting lost, and all of those different types of things as the disease progresses. So, about 75% of the time, this Alzheimer's disease, the diagnosis, is equivalent to what we're seeing under the microscope, but maybe 20% of the time, that's not true. And over the last decade, there have been incredible advances in the field of Alzheimer's disease. I know this is better and this is changing, but again, this study is from some of the top centers in the world. So what does that mean for the people that don't go to those top centers, that might only go to a primary care provider? It's not a one-to-one. Some people are motivated to donate their brain because of teaching. So this is actually a different program at UT Health San Antonio, but one that people sometimes think of. I hear the term donating my body to science, and that's what this is usually about. These are called willed body programs, and these are people that donate their body, and it goes to a program that does cadaveric research and education for medical students and residents. And again, these individuals, they're typically, there's memorial expenses are covered by the program. There's usually a ceremony for the families, laying of flowers when the bodies are no longer used for medical research. But here, this is kind of, to me, the purest example of being motivated for teaching, where the families aren't getting a report back, they're not getting answers, but they know that their loved one's gift is helping train the next generation of clinician, of scientists, so that they have a better understanding of diseases and of the human body. And then that last one that I had on my list was kind of similar to that closure, but stated maybe another way, is family planning. Different neurodegenerative disorders have different degrees of heritability. So you think of that family tree. And Alzheimer's disease, we often hear, oh, my mother had Alzheimer's disease. My brother has Alzheimer's disease, right? And other disorders are very strongly genetic, where it might be entire families have this disease. So by knowing the pathology and to be able to get the tissue that we can freeze and then get DNA and look at the genetics too, we can start understanding how specific pathological diagnoses affect other family members. And that might involve elements of family planning in terms of having kids, what to do from that. All of this is kind of part of that. And again, because we're part of an amazing group, an amazing team, we have other resources that help there too. So we have social workers, counselors, genetic counselors that can help with all of those aspects too. Okay, so kind of shifting, those were some motivations. Now these are some questions that kind of come up that we'll get. So the first one that I wanted to say is brain donation and religion. Can I donate my brain if I am, this faith or this belief? I would say most every religion views organ donation as a valuable and important part of society. What's a little bit difficult is most of that is for the organ donation for transplantation, right? Most of these, what's been kind of stated and put out by different religious organizations pertains to that. But I kind of grouping them all together, I think the views would be very similar for research donation as well when it's done, appropriately. So the Pope has previously said organ, eye, and tissue donation is considered an act of charity and love. The Presbyterian Church encouraged all Christians to become organ and tissue donors in their 1983 General Assembly. So by large, most religious organizations are fairly supportive of that. There are some religious faiths that are a little bit more restrictive when it comes to cadaveric or deceased body donation, but the vast majority are supportive. So just thinking, Christianity in specific, there were a few things that I just kind of wanted to go through as kind of scripture-based ways that I look at brain donation. So I was just going to talk about, both our heavenly body and our earthly body, a devotion to helping others, which we've already kind of touched on, and then the Last Supper. So starting with a passage from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, they write, "There are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the glory of the heavenly is one kind, and the glory of the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. For stars differ from stars in glory. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable, and what is raised is imperishable. What is sown in dishonor is raised in glory. What is sown in weakness is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there's a natural body, there's also a spiritual body." And then from verses 40 to 44, going to another verse in verse 50, "I tell you this, brothers, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable." Maybe put in another way, kind of in Genesis, this is one that I always kind of think of and have in my head when I think and view mortality, is that by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground for which you are taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Certainly, our bodies are our temples. We are stewards of Christ. We are reflections of Christ, and our bodies are sacred. But our bodies are also organic. Our bodies are from the earth. They're not something that we take with us when we go, right? So I think that's just kind of that first point to be made. When people are thinking of, do I need to be traditionally buried to get into the kingdom of heaven? Scripture and as said that this physical body is only temporary, and this will remain here on earth. It's your heavenly body, it's your spiritual body that continues forever. And then, this isn't unique to kind of religious views and spiritual views. This idea is also found in secular society as well. So just last weekend, my wife had ran into a store to get lunch for us, and I was sitting in the car, and my 4-year-old daughter, Ruby, was watching The Lion King on my phone, a classic Disney movie. And I was kind of sitting there waiting. She had my phone, so I was just sitting quietly. And I was but I could hear it going. And there was a point kind of early in the movie where the king lion Mufasa, voiced by James Earl Jones, says to Simba, "Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. As king, you need to understand that balance and respect for all creatures, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope." And then Simba chimes in, "Well, hey, don't we eat the antelope?" And then Mufasa replies, "When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass. And so we are all connected in the great circle of life," right? So again, just this concept of that, life goes on, life continues, our organic bodies are organic, and that's true of the brain as well. The other concept that I kind of wanted to bring into this too is this concept of selflessness, this altruism, wanting to make a difference. So Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 through 4, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others." And then one of the, ultimately, what I view as one of the most important, commandments, most important points of scriptures that I try to teach my kids, is that my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for a friend. Being a part of a larger society, of a larger culture, loving your neighbors, that is Christ-like, and that's what we strive to emulate. So I think this is kind of beautifully encapsulated in the Last Supper, right? Jesus, towards the beginning of the crucifixion, Jesus knew his time was coming near. He selflessly gave himself for our sins and for our salvation. And, what I think is very interesting, and a lot of people might not see it this way, but being as somebody who's in a brain bank and does brain donation, Jesus gives the bread and the wine as indication of the body and the blood. He is giving his body as a final sign, as his final gift to his disciples. And I think, when I think of that for people that are donating, they are giving their bodies as a final gift to others. So I just think it's kind of a beautiful way of thinking both of the selflessness of Jesus recognizing that his heavenly body is of earth, and that his last gift is to give that to others. So, kind of shifting gears, getting a little bit into other questions, but again, kind of thinking memorials, and what we usually think of as traditional burial and cremation is getting bigger, but one of the questions that comes up with brain donation is, I have memorial plans, how does brain donation fit in with that? And I would say, brain donation really doesn't delay or affect funeral arrangements. When we get people that pre-register, that pre-enroll, they fill out that form and we already have it, right when we get a call that a donor has died, we try to go get that brain donation within, as quickly as we can, often within 24 hours. And we go to the funeral home and we do it there, so we're not delaying or holding up that process. We actually do it in a way where you can still have open casket burials. We do it where you can still be cremated. I trained in Jacksonville, Florida before coming here. So we had donors that would do other things, like take their cremated remains and put them into these large concrete balls that would go into the ocean to start reefs. I've heard of memorial space flights, people putting their ashes in fireworks and blasting them off into the skies. There's a lot of different creative ways that people choose to be memorialized. I'm not endorsing or recommending any of these. Each decision is everyone's own. But I'm just kind of pointing out different scenarios to say that the brain donation process is early and unintrusive. Another question is that of cost, and I think certainly what we do is there are expenses in it. The solution, because of those expenses, some other brain banks have taken is, to maybe have the families pay for the cost of donation or pay for this or that. But we want to, again, we're still a new resource to our community, and we want to make this as accessible as possible. If we start putting barriers, if we start putting hurdles, we start putting numbers on things, then it gets away from the spirit of wanting to help and serve people. So for us, brain donation is a free service to the family. We cover all the costs that are associated with transportation of the body if we need to, of doing the autopsy, of doing the assessment exam. But that being said, we don't cover costs for memorial arrangements if somebody wants to do whatever type of burial, cremation, anything like that. Another question is condition, right? You're at an Alzheimer's disease center. Surely you only take Alzheimer's disease brains, and that is definitely not true. We get a lot of Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is the most common dementia in neurodegenerative disorders, but we get a lot of other ones as well. Vascular dementia, Parkinson's disease, frontal temporal dementia, ALS, Huntington's disease, you name it. We've got a lot of different types of neurodegenerative conditions in our brain bank. And we actually don't just take neurodegeneration as well. We take donation from cognitively normal people. Sometimes these are called controls. I don't think they're, in aging, how dynamic it can be, there's no true control. Everybody has a different experience when it comes to brain aging. But the really interesting thing about people that don't have dementia and getting their brains is we can look for the things that might have spared them from getting dementia altogether. This is something that's called resistance. What about you and your experience and your lifestyle, what prevented you from getting Alzheimer's disease? And can we take those insights and help other people with that? Or there are people that actually, they might be normal, but when we do that autopsy, we look and they've got Alzheimer's disease in their brain, but they sure didn't show it while they were alive. This is something that's called resistance. Resistance was before, this is called resilience. So what about you were still getting that pathology in your brain, but what about made you able to function and perform normally despite having a head full of tau and amyloid? I think my clicker gave out on me. Laser pointer still works, but no. There we go. And then, I mean, this isn't common, but if, again, this is a family decision, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page, is supportive. If they have questions, we're happy to answer them. But if for any reason, at any time, your family, no longer wants to continue on with brain donation, that's okay too. I mean, this isn't a terminal commitment in that way. But you just let us know, and we can unenroll you just as easy as we can enroll you. I'm getting close to the end. Is that you, Robin? Should I just say next? There's only a couple more. Okay. So just some final thoughts and takeaway. Next, please. So just in summary, I don't want to make a huge long list, but just kind of two big bullet points if you only take away two things from this talk. So brain donation kind of in conjunction with all of the other amazing things that are going on at the Biggs Institute, our biobank, our clinic, all of that. It allows the providers and researchers to understand neurodegenerative diseases and dementia across an individual's lifespan or disease course. And this is true one-on-one. When we get that brain and we go back and we look at the clinical picture, we have a much clearer understanding of the disease for that one person. But it's also true collectively as well too. The more we know about the brain and can study differences and similarities between people with similar brains, but maybe different clinical pictures, or similar clinical pictures, but different brain pathologies, we start to learn more about how these diseases work. And then the last point too that I've got is brain donation is a selfless act, and to me, I really see this as a lasting legacy that can advance research, it can help future patients and families, it provides closure and important health information to loved ones, and it can teach the next generation of clinicians and scientists. Next, Robin. So I showed you my team, first and foremost acknowledging them and all the hard work that they do. Also wanting to acknowledge the support that we've had from the National Institutes of Health, from the Texas Alzheimer's Research and Care Consortium, and then just incredible support from y'all, from the community, from San Antonio. Without the buy-in, without the investment, both in dollars but in hard work and dedication, there would be no Brain Bank, there'd be no Biggs Institute. So thank you, San Antonio. And kind of lastly, and most importantly, acknowledgement and thank yous to the families. Behind every brain in the Brain Bank, we have 270 people that lived amazing lives, that had people around them that loved them, that people that still do, that we have had 270 families that we've been able to work with and hopefully bring comfort to them too. So, but their work, their dedication, their gift is what has made our Brain Bank. So with that, I will switch over, and then just this last slide is just kind of how people get a hold of us and how they reach us. We've got a business phone number, we've got an email, we've got our website, actually is very helpful. It's got a lot of information, a lot of the stuff I've talked about today, and the forms and stuff like that, in English and in Spanish too. I'm not here to get anybody's brain today to sign you up to enroll. We'll do that another day. Just call me and let me know. Yeah. But I mean, if people are interested in learning more, I mean, there's these resources here. I've also got a couple folders out on a table in the hall. Feel free to get that information. I know nobody's writing anything down or anything like that, but the information is there. Feel free to share it. Feel free to if it's something that you're interested, think about it and consider it. And again, I'm happy to kind of answer any questions that you have about the talk, about brain donation, or anything else. So thank you again for having me.
If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll hand you the mic for the benefit of people that are live streaming. Because if you don't use the mic, then they can't hear what you're saying. Any questions?
I'd like to know what is the oldest brain that you've had donated?
That's a great question. The oldest brain, I will say the youngest brain that we have was 38 years old. The oldest brain that we have is 101 years old. So it really runs the range. Most of our donors are in their 70s and 80s, but we're seeing more and more donations from people in their 90s and yes, even in 100.
My other question is, are you involved with any of the medications that are possibly helpful in this situation?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too. So I am the scientific type of doctor that is in the lab. I'm not seeing patients. Part of our brain bank is we collect that information to know what type of effects different medications have. But I will say that the Biggs Institute, in general, we've got a big clinical team, and importantly, because we're a new Alzheimer's disease center, because we're in a community that is often underrepresented and underrecognized, we are actually in a very large number of clinical studies for some of the newest and greatest therapies that are in development right now. So a lot of the patients in the clinic have access to these new anti-amyloid antibody therapies that are kind of coming out in the news and stuff like that.
Did you tell me that when we were talking that there are things that are really being learned from the blood of people concerning these various diseases? I think probably Alzheimer's is the most, but maybe even dementia.
Yeah, so the way that we have diagnosed Alzheimer's disease has evolved a lot over the last 50 plus years. One of the big things we still do today is look at the clinical picture, look at all the symptoms, right? And if the puzzle pieces kind of seem to indicate Alzheimer's disease, that's how a diagnosis is often made. But there's been a lot of advancement in two different diagnostic modalities. One of them is what's called neuroimaging. So what you do is you lie down in a scanner. Oftentimes there's a specific type of neuroimaging called PET, stands for positron emission tomography, but basically what it is you take a little bit of a non-harmful radioligand that can bind to the different things that we want it to, and it will fluoresce, it will glow, make a little signal that we can measure on that MRI scanner. So there are now ways that we can measure tau and amyloid from that. But the cool thing about what you're just mentioning in the blood is we now have developed really sensitive instruments. When we look for those Alzheimer's markers in the blood, they're often at such low quantities that previously it was impossible to measure them. We didn't have anything sensitive enough to. But now there are techniques that are developed and machines that have been developed where we can measure the tau and amyloid in the brain in an individual's blood as well. So those techniques are starting to become more widespread and widely.
Yeah, thank you.
So my question is about, I guess, pre-donation of the brain. So my dad did a study at Wake Forest University, he was in clinical trials, and we donated his brain to the facility there. But you mentioned the healthy brain. So I know studies can show that you have the propensity toward Alzheimer's 20 years before having it. And my dad had a PET scan. I've actually been tested for the APOE4 gene. And so I'm curious, in the healthy brains that you're getting, do you do studies prior for families that have Alzheimer's in the family, and kind of what's helpful, I guess, for younger individuals?
That's a good question. And definitely, even with the new therapies that are coming out, they were tested on people with Alzheimer's disease, with kind of early Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment, and they're showing a benefit. They can reduce disease, they eliminate the amyloid, they can extend life. Typically, it's not years and years yet, but extend life months, getting closer to a year. But the push is to get these treatments to individuals at risk younger and younger. Because like you mentioned, there is a buildup of disease. You don't wake up one day with a head full of these pathologies. They build up over decades. And if we can stop them early from progressing and continuing, there's going to be more of a meaningful impact. What we're doing through the brain bank is oftentimes we're getting the donation and it's end stage, but we will send, we've kind of got a sub-study where we will send saliva kits to different family members so they can provide the DNA and we can start to look at some of those similarities across people. And the other part of our brain bank is again this biobank as well. We've got, it's actually separate from us, but at the same institution, and they're doing studies where we're getting families in and we're measuring in different families as well. And the hope is that eventually we'll get brain donations on a lot of those individuals.
Hello. My mom has been diagnosed with dementia. Can you kind of touch on what is dementia versus Alzheimer's and that kind of thing? And she's 85 years old, and I'm 55, and I'm noticing that I'm starting to get really forgetful and some different symptoms and stuff like that. So how would you work with us, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So certainly, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, much like any other organ in your body, brain aging is something that happens as we get older as well. So there are, you know, changes that are to be expected as you continue to get older, right? You'll become more forgetful of appointments and you'll lose your keys and stuff like that. But that might not be dementia full-blown. It's a little bit of a nondescript term, and it's a little bit of a catch-all. I think of dementia as the umbrella under which all the different neurodegenerative diseases live. But dementia is a progressive disease. So people can sometimes have very acute changes in cognition. That's called delirium. But dementia is a progressive and chronic disease. So it builds, it gets worse, and it doesn't get better. And it's in a way just more advanced than what you'd expect with normal aging. So again, that's not specific, but one of the things with dementia is oftentimes when you're young and you get a neurodegenerative disease like ALS, it's very pure and there aren't any other components to it. But when you're older, not only is there this buildup of Alzheimer's disease, but there is a increased risk of vascular pathology and vascular dementia. There are other diseases like the same pathology in Parkinson's disease that can form in the brain. There's another pathology actually called TDP-43 that we're learning more and more increases with age. So dementia is kind of this interesting collection of multiple different things going on at the same time. And more often than not, Alzheimer's is part of that. But because you can have all of these overlapping things, it can be very difficult for clinicians to put their finger on pure Alzheimer's disease or this or that. So dementia is kind of a term to kind of, you know, show that, hey, this is neurodegeneration, but we can't quite pinpoint what it is. We get a lot of donors that have dementia that come to our brain bank eventually because they want to know, you know, what was actually going on under there. And with my grandmother's brain, it was Alzheimer's disease, but it was also cerebrovascular disease. It was also this what we call limbic age-related TDP-43 pathology. It was a combination of multiple different things.
Other questions? Yeah.
What happens after, like after you've run all the tests and everything?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we will get the brain, we get the tissue prepared in a way that we can do all of these different tests, right? And then we do an evaluation. There are kind of like standards in our space where a lot of different centers like to do things the same way so that we make sure we're being very detailed, very comprehensive. We're not skipping things. We're collecting data that we can put into this larger central repository so other people can do research with very similar data. So that is part of our evaluation process. But again, what I was saying with our two-sided coin, first and foremost, is to help families. So we take that evaluation and we write a report, we write a letter, and we give that information back to families so that they know. Sometimes we sit down with them one-on-one and describe things, answer questions, and those types of things too. There might be follow-up with family if they're interested in family planning or getting into studies after brain donation. But all of that material is preserved and banked for research in the future. We don't know now what the key area of the brain is, what the key type of tissue is going to be, but we want to have it, we want to have those things there for when we learn about that, critical piece of information so we can go back to that tissue. So we actually, we keep all of the slides, all of the blocks, all of the tissue preserved properly so that we can go back. And when I was doing my research, I would go back to cases that were, banked 20 years ago, and we can make discoveries still in that.
Other questions? Well, Kevin, thank you for being with us today. I hope you'll be able to stay with us for lunch. And so Kevin will be here. As a token of our appreciation, this is a history of First Presbyterian Church that was compiled at our 150th anniversary. We've just celebrated our 175th 5 or 6 years ago. We're getting closer to 180, 181, I think. So if anybody wants to write another book so that we have something to give to our speakers. But thank you so much for being here. Appreciate all that you have shared with us. Thank you. Let me pray for lunch, and then we'll enjoy time together around the tables. Father, thank you for the way that you have given individuals like Kevin the opportunity to take a deeper look into what you have created and how you have made us and how you have knitted our innermost being as you planned out for us. Thank you for the insight that can be gathered, and certainly the dementia and Alzheimer's and memory issues are very, very much a part of our everyday life. Thank you for the time that these folks have taken and the wisdom that they have gained and the opportunity that they have and we have to be enlightened from their studies. Pray that you be with them, guide and direct them, and thank you for just our time together here today. Thank you for the lunch that we will share together. Ask your blessing on those that have prepared it, those that will serve it, and give us a great time of fellowship around these tables. In Jesus' name, amen. One announcement. You've probably learned that Jim Johnson died earlier in the week, early Tuesday morning. His memorial service will be October 23rd. It's a Monday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that more information will be coming from that. Pray for Nancy. I saw Nancy yesterday, spent quite a bit of time with her. She's doing well. She understands that life is as long as God gives it to us, and she understands that Jim is now experiencing the joy of his salvation in ways that we can only imagine. Yes, she is grieving, but I like to always point us to Scripture that tells us that we grieve, but we don't grieve without hope, because our hope is in the power and authority of Christ's death and resurrection. So pray for Nancy. I think she would enjoy, if you have been close to her over the years, she would enjoy a phone call, or at least drop her a note. That the timing, I feel responsible for the timing of the service because they wanted me to do it, and I'm going to be gone all next week. But Jim was cremated, and that doesn't hinder the ability to wait. So, reach out to Nancy if you have had opportunities in the past. I'm sure she would appreciate it. and pray for her and her family, her boys, as they prepare for the service coming up. Okay, let's grab lunch. I hope that I think we have plenty of seats. I haven't been counting. If you didn't reserve a lunch, kind of wait until we